Should I get a whole life insurance policy if I don't have that much money to work with? We get this question all the time. What I see a lot is typically younger individuals reaching out saying, I really like the idea of whole life insurance. I want to grow the cash value, create my own bank, and use it to invest in real estate in the future or buy my next car. I'm like, okay, that is great. But then when we look at the individual's cash flow, they're in a situation where they are barely getting by, and it doesn't make sense to start a whole life insurance policy, mainly because in the early years, I do take a hit on my money. I take a loss, which if I'm already barely getting by, it doesn't make sense to inflict more financial pain. So what we're going to go over in today's video is 1, what we see a lot, 2, what I would do if I were in that position, and I've been there before. I'll share a little bit about that. And then 3, I'll go over how you could set up a whole life insurance policy that has a very low minimum commitment and the ability to add more money as you have more cash flow. So we can start out where we commit to a small amount and then add more money over time, which is pretty cool. So let's start with what we see a lot. We get this quite frequently. Someone who is usually in their 20s or early 30s that has an income between $30,000 and $50,000 per year. Money that they have in savings might be $1,000, sometimes less than that. It's paycheck to paycheck. Now they're doing research on personal finance. They come across whole life insurance, particularly the cash value, and they say, I really want to start a policy. I think this can really help me, especially long term. I'm like, okay, that's great that you've been doing research and it can help you from a long-term perspective. However, when we look at what they want something like this, $5K per year, as far as what they want to pay in a policy, which might be $400 per month, and their cash flow, which is their income, is 50 grand, but their expenses are $50,000. So there's no money to work with. Now, have you ever felt like this? You're 25 years old, you got a ton of energy, you research something exciting and you say, okay, I think I can make this work. I make $50,000 per year. I don't really have that much money in the bank, but if I figure things out, if I just go out to eat a little bit less, if I don't go out for coffee, I think I could come up with 5K without doing a budget or anything like that. I'll just figure it out. Have you ever thought like that? I have, and it was not a good experience. I'll share that in a little bit. But here's what I would do. So, before starting a whole life insurance policy, I want to make that point very clear. Before I start a policy, I would recommend working on a budget. One of the best things you can do when it comes to working on a budget is just writing things down. It's an exercise that most of us don't do, but it will help you so much. What it involves is just writing down your income. You can write down before tax and after tax. That'll give you a sense of what you are actually paying in taxes every paycheck, if your taxes are withheld from every paycheck. Then write down your expenses. You could do it every day, every week, whatever works best for you. Now, if you said, hey, writing things down isn't really for me. I'm kind of the same because I always lose everything. So I like to use Excel. Personally, that helps me a lot. I've also used some apps before. I think I used Rocket Money. That may have been one of them. But there's a lot of apps out there that can be very, very helpful just to tracking where your money is going. This helps give you a better picture to see where your money is going, and now you can start to work on a solution. So once we have an idea of where someone's money is going, what we like to do is work on paying down any debt that they have to free up cash flow. We don't want to budget and try and cut back on going out to eat to put money into a policy. Some people like to do that. I'm not a big fan of it. But instead, what we would do is pay down any bad debt, usually credit cards with high interest rates, pay that down first, save money in the bank, get that buffer to an amount where you can breathe a bit, where if you lose your job, you're good for 3 to 6 months. We don't have to sweat over that. So save money in the bank, keep it in the bank. So that's a muscle you're going to have to work a bit. I had to work that a lot in my 20s, where first I had to learn how to save, and then second, I had to learn how to keep it. Because when it was there, I'm like, I never had this before. I'm going to go out and spend it on something stupid. I'm like, okay, why did I do that? If I could go back in time and talk to my younger self, I would say, Steve, what are you doing here? meaning don't spend it on stupid stuff. But once you do those two, now we can potentially consider starting a whole life insurance policy where you can really start it right. And this is going to take time to do, meaning it's usually not a 3 to 6 month fix. It might be a 1 to 2 year fix, really to work those habits into your life, and now you can use a policy in the right way. Now, why we want to do all of this is because the last thing we ever want is for the life insurance policy to feel like a burden. Because once it feels like a burden, that's where we start to regret purchasing it. We look at it and say, why am I even doing this? I'm better off putting my money somewhere else, especially in the early years. I started my first policy in my early 20s. I think I was 23 or 24 years old at the time, and my income was like nothing. I think I made $8,000 for the year. That first whole life insurance policy was close to $200 per month. I think that with a convertible term I had, it might have been, it was $180 or $220 per month, something like that. But I paid that, and I struggled. It was set up where it was just base premium. I didn't know what I was doing. My manager recommended that. This is when I first started in the industry before I worked at the executive benefits planning firm. But I had it set up that way, and it was a struggle to make the payment. It almost lapsed multiple times. I would borrow from it anytime I built up any cash value, and it just was not a good feeling. I thought about canceling it many times. Fortunately, I didn't. I was able to keep it, which I'm happy about, but I wouldn't advise going through that. Like, there were different things I could have done with my money, such as paying off debt early on, just if I could go back in time and do it all over again. My point is, I'd rather have the money in savings first. This way I have room to breathe, and then I can attack a policy aggressively. Now, assuming that I do all that, and I'm in a position where I can now get a whole life insurance policy. Let's pretend it's the same guy earning $50,000 per year. Could be $30,000 per year, whatever. And we want to look at $5,000 per year. If you get a whole life insurance policy where you can fund $5,000 per year, does that mean that's what you're going to be billed for every year? $5,000 per year? Does not, and I would not do that. So, with a life insurance policy, your money can go toward either the premium or the paid up additions rider. If the total funding is going to be $5,000 per year, what I would do is set the premium as low as I could, which is going to be very close to $500 per year. And you can go with a company that will allow you to commit just to that premium. Might be $700 or $800 with a term insurance. But my point is, you can commit to a very small amount and then add the rest at your leisure. And when I add the rest toward this paid up additions rider, PUA payments immediately show up in cash value. There are fees associated with them. You won't see 100% of that payment show up in cash value, but you'll see the bulk show up in cash value immediately, begins compounding. That's the key to accelerating the cash value growth on a policy. But why I like this approach, and we do this for corporations and people putting in $1 million per year too, but it allows you to commit to a small amount that doesn't feel like a burden, especially after you've worked so hard to pay off the debt, which was a huge burden just hanging over you. Now you're committed to a small amount. When you add more money, you see it there in cash value. You can access it. It's compounding. You get the immediate gratification and the long-term benefit, which is nice. This is really how we maximize the cash value. With this setup, the base premium, if it's $500, guess how much shows up in cash value in the first year? Zero, or very close to zero. If I put $4,500 in PUAs, how much do you think would show up in cash value? Not $4,500, maybe it's $4,100 or $4,200. There's fees associated with that. This is another reason why I like to build money in checking and savings first and pay off some of my debt or all of my debt, depending on my situation, pay that off first and then start a policy because it just makes it easier. And then once I really build that up, now I can make decisions quicker and I could use it to pay off other debts. What we do sometimes is pay off bad debts such as credit card debts, free up enough cash flow fund a policy and then use the policy cash value to pay off other credit card debts. Why someone would do that is because with policy loans, what happens is your money keeps on compounding for you when you borrow against the policy. So people like to use a policy to pay off debt because it's still compounding while they're paying off bad debt. But anyway, let's take a look at an example of this and we'll wrap up with this. So what we've got is an illustration. This is for a 40-year-old individual. If this guy was 30 or 25, the minimum would be even lower than this. But I did 40 on purpose because at 40, it shows that we can have a minimum $530 per year. That's not the minimum monthly premium. It's under the word annual. So that's our minimum premium. We do have term insurance of about $100, so the true minimum is those two combined, call it $600 or $700 a year. And then everything else goes into that PUA rider, which I like to call cash dump-in, because it builds your cash value. Your cash value is a lot like account value. You'll see it down here under net cash value. But there you go. There's your PUA payment, $42.50 in cash value in the first year. So we do not see the full PUA payment show up in cash value immediately. So if you're brand new to this, you have debt, you're making $50K per year, your expenses are $50K per year, you force a policy to fund $5K, and you've got $4,200 in cash value, you just took a $750 hit. Or if you don't have any cash in savings, you're gonna feel that a lot, especially if your income's lower. So this is where we just like to talk through this with clients that we're working with and just help get them in a better situation to get their financial health where it needs to be, and then look to start a policy. Or maybe it's something else, like it depends on our situation. So as we look at this guy, we could wrap up with an analysis of the policy performance, because while someone might work on their debt first, they do want to still see what the policy will look like. Here we go. The cash value growth. If you put in $5K in the first year and you have $42.50 in the first year in cash value, how much did it grow by? Not $42.50. We see that sometimes and it drives me nuts. It's like, no, you put in $5,000. If it's worth $42.50, that is a loss, no matter how you slice it. In this case, it's a loss of $744. For the second year, we would take the second year cash value minus the first year cash value minus our annual payment. There we go. So it was $42.56. I put in 5. Now I've got $92.76. If it was $92.56, the growth would be 0, meaning I just got my 5K back. Here, I got $20. Might buy me a sandwich nowadays. But I didn't lose money, which is great. And then it continues to compound over time. And we could fund it shorter, longer, completely up to the individual. In this example, we looked at a 15-year funding period, and the cash value continues to compound over time, along with the death benefit. But again, this is a latter stage that we look at after someone pays off their debt or we free up some of the cash flow. And that is something we can talk through with you. It's always up to the individual. I remember going through that personally in the early days where I had a lot of debt and I was just trying to get myself out of the hole. It just takes time. Either A, you have to budget, or B, work on generating more income, which I do prefer to do, but that's a big time investment. And depending on your circumstances, if you have a wife, kid, and other obligations, that might not be realistic for your situation. Everyone's different. Anyway, the question, I don't have much money. Should I start a whole life insurance policy? The answer is probably not. It's usually best to work on freeing up cash flow so you can then more comfortably start a policy. Now, there are situations where it can make sense if we've got excess cash flow or we're using it to pay off debt. We've gone over case studies on that before, but in most cases, we like to try and improve the financial health of someone first. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to DM me or visit our website as well, ibcglobalinc.com. And as always, I hope this helps.